Hello, my name is Maria, and today I'm going to talk about the role of primary school professionals in helping primary school children cope with the death of a loved one. In life, we encounter various losses, which can be sudden or predictable, whether we are aware of them or not, and they affect us more or less. Among the losses we grieve are, for example, the death of a pet, the loss of a body part, divorce, moving, illness, and the death of a loved one. In a study from England and Wales, found that 3.3% of children and adolescents under the age of 16 have already experienced the death of a loved one. Grieving in childhood can have a significant impact on a child's development and is a risk factor for their mental health. Mourning is a healing process that maintains the memory of the deceased and the connection with them. It helps adjust to a new life without the person who has died. When someone dies, different reactions occur. Those reactions are individualized, meaning that they depend on the characteristics and circumstances of the person. After a loss follows grieving, which is healthy, natural, and very important. Just like for adults, grieving is unique for children. No one can predict how a person will grieve. Common reactions of grieving children and adolescents can be behavioral, such as aggressive behavior, arguments, isolation, need for attention. Emotional, like insecurity, anger, rage. Social, physical, spiritual, and problems at school, meaning inability to concentrate, poor academic performance, absence from class, forgetfulness, striving for perfection. Peers often find it difficult to empathize with the feelings of the grieving person, which can make the grieving person feel lonely or become a target of mockery, which can further reinforce the previous listed reactions of the grieving person. It is impossible to predict which forms of behavior will appear. It is possible that external signs of grief will not appear. Individual differences can be large. Most grieving children will recover with appropriate support. Besides the family, school is the most important factor influencing a child's experience of life and development. Children spend more time at school than at home, which means they have less time for outdoor and family activities. At the beginning of the morning, after the death of a loved one, parents are often overwhelmed by their own pain and obligations. At the time, other people can be a great help in temporarily taking over the tasks of communicating with the child, especially when the child does not want to talk to the parent about his or her feelings. The reason is often that the child does not want to burden the parents and wants to protect them. The social resistance to that is also reflected in the school environment, as it is not included in the teaching content and professionals do not include the topic of that in lessons, despite the fact that it is an important part of each of our lives. It is much easier for grieving children and professionals in school if they have already talked about that before encountering it, as they have already acquired basic concepts and verbal expressions about that, which makes it much easier for them to process events. The goal of my research was to research the role of professional workers at primary school in helping primary school children cope with the death of a loved one. I've researched what teachers and counselors need to be able to provide support to grieving children, how children grieve, and what do they need. I conducted a qualitative study in which I interviewed 10 people. I conducted interviews with 2 children and an adolescent who are coping with the death of a loved one, 4 professional workers, and 3 parents or guardians of children who has lost the loved one. In my research, I was interested in the ways in which children and adolescents in primary school grieve after the death of a loved one. Their responses to the death of a loved one vary depending on the developmental stage they are in. Adult interviews said that children in middle childhood do not understand that well. They talk about it more easily than older children and mostly react to the news of death with crying, sadness, a need for closeness and conversation, sometimes with aggressive behavior, but then behave as if nothing had happened. For children in late childhood, they said that they understand that and want to talk about it, while adolescents understand it but mostly do not want to talk about it. They interviewed children preserved memory of the deceased in various ways. They are organizing events, they have pictures in the rooms, they keep their clothes, they like to talk about them, visit their grave. And interviews noticed changes in children who were grieving. Positive changes, including improved academic performance and behavior, as well as emotional resistance. Negative changes included loss of eye contact, waking up at night, withdrawal, seeking attention, emotional outbursts, crying, appetite problems, emotional numbness, aggressive behavior, low self-esteem. Poor academic performance or even school phobia may occur at school. Older grieving individuals became more protective of the living. They needed more hugs and closeness. The participants in the study empathized the importance of the relationship between the grieving child and the person who wants to help them. They said that it is necessary to take enough time for the grieving, not to impose emotions, thoughts, and behavior on them. We must be aware that it is normal not to know the answers or not to know what to say. The school and family environment have a great influence on mourning children who have lost a loved one. The school responded to the death of a loved one in various ways. They said condolences, attended the funeral, hung a black flag, organized a memorial hour. Professionals at school prepared classroom and teaching hours on the topic of death and mourning, thus preparing classmates to receive the mourner. After returning to school, they needed some special attention. They needed help with learning, homework, and announced knowledge assessments. I hope that the research will help primary school professionals in their work with students who have lost a loved one. I would like to emphasize the importance of the school environment in the grieving process of children and adolescents and encourage professionals to organize training on the topic of death and grief for school employees. Thank you for your attention.